Hello, everyone. This is Sen from Sen Invest. Today, I have the great pleasure of interviewing Jim Forsythe, Chair of Citizens for Sound Money. Jim is an aerospace engineer and a former member of the New Hampshire State Senate. Today, Jim will be sharing with us why we should invest in gold and silver and specifically the benefits offered by the Kinesis Money system. Without further ado, let's begin with today's interview. So today I have a very special guest. I'll be interviewing Jim Forsythe. So welcome to my channel, Jim. And I'd like to start by just asking you to give a brief introduction. Yeah, could you tell us about yourself?
Sure. Well, first off, thanks for having me. So I got my start back, took Russian in high school and then went to the Soviet Union a couple of times. And seeing the Soviet Union made me really love free markets. And it encouraged me to join the military to defend against communism. And did such a great job. The wall fell within a couple of weeks, I guess. But near the end of actually it was after I got out of the military, I met Ron Paul when he was thinking about campaigning in 2008. So I met him in 2007. And he was the person who really introduced me into sound money. Already had that strong background in free market economics, but then he's the one who got me to understand that sound money is 50% every transaction. So it's absolutely vital. I wound up running for state senate 2010, got elected. Then I served as Ron Paul's New Hampshire campaign chair in 2012. And then just recently, last year, kind of quit my job, started up a nonprofit to Citizens for Sound Money, along with Marion Ward, our executive director, to encourage people to use sound money and protect the right to do so.
Excellent. Thanks a lot, Jim. So I think that brings me to the first question. So for my channel, I have a lot of followers, and they're in a variety of projects, crypto projects. It could range from maybe trading with automated trading robots, even to these very extreme projects, which is degenerate DeFi. Maybe you've heard of it. It's very high risk, kind of like a Ponzi type of project, and people put in money. They hope to make these astronomical returns, and more often than not, the project crashes. Most people lose everything or most of their investment. So, why should my subscribers be interested in gold and silver? And really, why should anybody maybe at this time in our history be interested in gold and silver investing?
Well, it's interesting the behavior you describe, because I think that's very typical of right now, this period in time, and that's because there's a lot of things that contributed. One is, with the Fed dropping interest rates so low for so long, that basically gets rid of, any sort of yield that you can get off of most quote unquote safe investments. And so that encourages people to go further and further up the risk spectrum. Plus all the liquidity that comes around because of the Fed injecting all this liquidity also makes these kind of bubbles that grow and burst. And so it's natural for people to try to, catch that wave. I mean, if you look back, tulip mania, back in the Netherlands years ago or centuries ago, it was fueled by, bank money printing essentially. And, it actually reminds me of the NFT craze that you see nowadays is, whenever you get this money printing, you start getting bubbles in all these assets. And then you get people attempting to speculate. So now, speculating when you're young, there's really nothing wrong with that. Actually, I'm speculating while I'm old, but it's nice to do kind of some intelligent speculation. But gold and silver, I think are, because of all the money printing that's going on, and because of the potential dollar currency crisis that we're coming up on. I mean, paper currencies have been tried throughout the centuries, and their track record is zero successes. It's thousands of times paper currency has been tried, around the world, and generally they fail within 30 to 50 years, and we're right at 50 years. And so, if you do make some nice speculative gains in one of those projects, the good thing to do is book it into something that is safe. And gold is one of the few assets that you can say is not going to go to zero. Never has, in thousands of years. It's always had value. In fact, back in Roman times, an ounce of gold could buy a toga and sandals, and now it can buy a suit. The purchasing powers has stayed there throughout time. Plus, there is some speculative upside with gold and silver in the sense of if we do see the collapse of fiat and the return to sound money, then you can see kind of a one-time reset upwards in value of these assets.
Great. And this year, especially with what's been going on with the war between Russia and Ukraine, and also I saw a move made by Russia. It looks like they have set a price for gold in rubles. Do you see possibly maybe a return to gold, maybe, or a peg to gold coming back, similar to what the dollar was before the Nixon shock? Do you see that potentially happening in the near time?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the way the East is moving in general. If you look at China, Russia, they've all been stockpiling gold as kind of a neutral reserve asset versus the dollar, because as we all know now, the dollar can be used as a weapon against other countries, whereas gold is really a neutral asset. Nobody has true control over it. It's a good. So yeah, I definitely see that happening. China seems to be more towards not an explicit backing, but more making their currency freely exchangeable for gold. The Shanghai Gold Exchange, the vast majority of contracts settle for physical, unlike in London and in New York. So they seem to be headed towards kind of a free floating exchange rate with gold. Yeah, Russia, what they did is it was they did a fixed ruble price for gold, but it was only to buy, and it was to buy from the Russian banks. So it was kind of a one-way transaction that way. They also eliminated the VAT tax for their citizens to hold gold and encouraged them to swap their dollars for gold. So yeah, that's definitely the direction many Eastern countries are heading. But unfortunately, the United States is not. But the people in the United States can. That's the whole goal of our organization: is don't wait for the government to solve the problem, solve it for yourselves. Start moving to sound money today, before it's too late.
Well, Jim, that brings me to my next question, which is how do we get into gold and silver investing? There's many options out there. For example, years ago, I remember I used to send checks in the mail to, say, JM Bullion or APMEX, these physical bullion dealers, and get coins. I've been fascinated in coins for a while. So that's a more traditional way. But nowadays with crypto, we have like Pax Gold, which is backed one-to-one with physical gold, and then we have Kinesis Money, which specifically I'd like to ask you about Kinesis Money today. What are the benefits that Kinesis Money could offer for investors in precious metals?
Yeah, and first I'll have to back up a second. You're talking about how do they get into gold. I definitely encourage everybody to have some gold and silver physically in their possession, because it's completely absent counterparty risk, and that's a real advantage of gold and silver. The problem with physical gold and silver, having too much of it, is then you introduce yourself to theft risk. Also, the spread between the buying prices for coins versus the selling prices is pretty high. In other words, it's not as liquid as some of the options you mentioned, Pax Gold, Kinesis. So Pax Gold, my issue with Pax Gold is that it's not redeemable in reasonable quantities. It's kind of like a gold futures contract, a gold bar, which is huge. Whereas Kinesis, you can redeem for 100 grams of gold or 200 ounces of silver. Plus, there's some ways you can use it to spend to buy physical products as well. So yeah, the really interesting thing about Kinesis is the yield engine. Basically, the transaction fees, which are relatively low, 0.22% for exchanges, 0.45% for transfers. Those fees go into a fee pool, and then over half of those go back out to the user in a number of ways. It's 15% goes towards holders, in proportion to their holding. So it's very much like, the old days when your money market savings account would actually give you interest. Now it doesn't. But if you're holding gold and silver within the Kinesis system, you can get a yield on that. Plus, with gold and silver, you also have that long-term inflation protection as well. So it's a kind of a good double whammy. Then there's also a velocity yield based on, people who are more active using the system will wind up getting a higher yield, and then referrals yield 7.5% of the fees from the transactions from anybody that you refer. So Yeah, so that's the big picture is, gold and silver, you hear people like, I forget the guy's name, Warren Buffett, say, he's not interested in gold. It doesn't have a yield. So by attaching a yield to gold and silver, it makes it worth having the counterparty risk, and also it makes it more competitive with traditional savings instruments like treasury bonds, which have a yield, but at this point their yield is negative after you take into account the rate of inflation.
Great. So I think yield here is very important to touch on because as with some of the projects that I was mentioning previously, these very high risk projects give high yield. So naturally people are interested in higher yields, chasing yields and such. And while yields with Kinesis are lower, I see them as more sustainable. But you mentioned the velocity yield, and that appears to be the highest yield according to my research in Kinesis, specifically holding the KVT token. So I'd like to get more into that. Why should investors be interested in holding KVT, and maybe what are some benefits, what are some risks of KVT?
Yeah, so distinguish, there is a velocity yield that's 10% of the fee pool that goes towards, basically how much you use the system. But what you're talking about is the Kinesis velocity token yield. That's 20% of the fee pool. And the interesting thing about that is there's only 300,000 of them that are ever going to exist. And so you can imagine 20% of the fee pool, but as the system grows in size, in other words, as there's more and more holdings, then the fee pool is going to grow, yet the denominator in that calculation for the yield is 300,000. It's not going to grow. And that yield is paid in KAU and KAG, in other words, gold and silver. So there's very few ways you can get a gold and silver yield out there anywhere. And then this is one where you can get a gold and silver yield, and it has the potential upside of, as the system grows. And, I can think of, any stock company, they can always dilute the shares, but this is fixed at 300,000. So it's extremely powerful. So we've been very active, encouraging people to get a couple of these. They are higher risk compared to just getting gold and silver, because you're counting on the system to grow in size. Right now, the yields are not expected to be very big, but as the system grows, they could get substantially big. And as they get larger, the resale value of the KVT can go up substantially. So it's not, for those geared towards looking at these high risk, things, definitely it's worth checking out. Although to me, it feels more medium risk at this point, especially, we sell a couple at discounted prices to people, and by buying at a discounted price, that reduces the risk essentially, because it means the yield as a percentage will be higher based off your buying price.
Okay, great. And I think that brings me to my next question now, which is buying the KVT. You mentioned that you have a discount. I noticed that presently the price is going for about $1,800 on the Kinesis exchange at the moment. So what are the benefits from buying from your organization, which is the Citizens for Sound Money?
Yeah, so the KVT on the exchange is not truly an exchange right now. Those are coming from Kinesis, and they listed a bunch of different prices, and the ones at the lower prices have sold out. And so the price keeps going up as people buy the ones that are on there. However, people can also get them via minting. And minting is basically when you go to Kinesis Mint, and if you mint gold, it means they're adding gold to the shelves and they're giving you the token that backs it. And then there's a fee associated with that. And for right now, it was every $75,000 of minting you do, you get a KVT for free. Now it's 100,000. Although if you're in the US, getting that KVT requires accreditation. So the cost of doing that kind of depends on how big of a group of KA you're minting with. And before that ranged from anywhere from $850 to $1,200. But now that the threshold's moved up to 100,000, it's really starting at 1,150 or above the cost of minting. We were minting and reselling, minting in high volume to get the cost down, and then reselling those at to two people, two KVT per account, to try to spread ownership in the system. But we actually have a pool of KVT that are still at that $75,000 threshold that we can mint. And that's why we're able to sell KVT at 1050 rather than a higher price. So it's actually below the cost of minting right now for most people that you can get them from us. And there's also a referral program. Anybody can buy two at that price. If you refer someone else and they buy, then that entitles you to get another one at that price.
Excellent. So that brings me to my last question for today, Jim, which is about your organization. So I saw on your website that you are the chair for the Citizens for Sound Money. So could you share with us a little bit about what your organization is, what it does?
Yeah, so we're a 501c4, organized 501c4, and the basic goal is to encourage the use of sound money and protect people's right to do so. That second part would be lobbying efforts, but our philosophy really is government didn't decide what money is. They're not the ones that determine what money is. Gold and silver arose naturally as part of the barter process, and it was something that people determined was universally valued. It was divisible. It was recognizable. So it wound up to be used as, it rose naturally to be used as money and a store of value. And so we're not waiting on the government to find a solution. We are encouraging people to start using sound money today. And as you mentioned Kinesis, and we believe, this group of what we call asset-backed digital currencies. We don't call them crypto because crypto has a certain connotation in people's mind. It's generally it's unbacked by an asset. We also don't use stable coins. People at first were calling gold and silver blockchain. They'd call it stable coins, but we saw what was happening with UST months ago and said that this is not going to be good, and the name should be different. So asset-backed digital currencies. So it's basically gold and silver on blockchain. For us to serve as a monetary system, it also needs to be redeemable into physical. That gives you that cash aspect, that we're used to having as money, something where you can do a transaction anonymously, privately, or when the electricity is out. So we've got a YouTube channel, and we've interviewed different companies that provide asset-backed digital currencies, and then also monetary metals, which isn't an asset-backed digital currency, but they basically can allow people to lease their gold and silver to earn a yield as well. And then we are involved in the physical side of gold and silver. So we've got some 1/5 ounce rounds with our information, our website, and our logo on it. Definitely recommend people sign up on our website, citizensforsoundmoney.org, the number 4, because we have a newsletter that goes out. And as we get more of these coins, we'll be sending out a coupon code so people can get them at cost versus at the normal high premiums that you'd get for a fractional silver product like that.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much today, Jim. It's been a pleasure interviewing you on Sun Invest. Thank you for your time.
Sure. And thanks for having me and for what you do.
So what do you think of investing in precious metals? Please tell me in the comments below this video. If you'd like to learn more about Kinesis Money, please see my review where I give you a sneak peek behind the scenes at my very own Kinesis Money account. Not subscribed to my channel? Please subscribe today to be sure you don't miss another episode of real reviews, real results right here on Sun Invest. Have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.